Welcome to the latest episode of the Everyday Investor, and thank you to all the new recent arrivals as well. New subscribers are apparently highly correlated to interest rates falling. I guess that's negative correlation. I guess that shouldn't be a surprise, right? But hey, here I am. Now, if you are new here though, and we haven't said hello, and welcome along. I'm glad to be able to share some of the conversations that I'm having and to drop a few ideas around building new wealth for the new world. Of course, none of it's financial advice because I don't know any of your circumstances and I'm not telling you to buy or sell investment products. But there is a need here also to offer an additional disclaimer. Every human under the sun has a bias or a tilt towards one worldview or a different worldview over here, and I'm no different. My hope is that my unique perspectives will help shed some light on a few things and maybe make you more wealthy in the future. But I also acknowledge that some views that people hold can actually cause harm if they're applied in the incorrect context. So for this reason, when it comes to matters relating to money especially, or financial advice, or even health, I guess, the best strategy is to always listen to a few diverse voices that cover a range of ideas. And I say this because in the investment world, you can find these odd spaces, I guess, where there are a high concentration of people who believe in the exact same thing. And a little bit cult-like, right? So you just have to watch out for that sort of thing. But what are some of the views that you should be mindful of when it comes to me, you may wonder. So skip ahead 20 seconds if you don't care, but allow me to share 7 sentences around some of my beliefs in this area. I believe we have the power to change our financial future with the quality of the choices that we make from here. And I also believe that our past decisions can help create our present state. We're responsible for that. I believe that if you're teaching your kids, assuming you have them, how to think critically, work hard, and be creative with their problem solving, you're going to really create the intergenerational wealth that you desire. I really believe that new wealth starts in the mind before it hits our investment account. And that's why in a world where information is exponential, it's an important job to discard all of the ideas out there that can make you poor. Now, I like active and passive on purpose. For this reason, I also respect and encourage the DIY investment pathway for investing, right? But I also promote financial advice. I practice diversification and concentration. I'm into mainstream investment and unconventional as well. On and on we can go. If you want to learn what to think to get ahead and what to invest in to get rich, this podcast is definitely not for you because you're not going to get that black and white answer that you probably really want. All I want to do is to learn from other people how to be a better investor myself, and I want to help you how to think your own way wealthy. And this really is important. The world contains a very, very narrow and narrowing range of acceptable ideas that'll one day make a lot of people poor. We need both sides of the coin to buy our freedom. Investing for the future may involve an honest acceptance of the facts and their most obvious meaning, but we should also consider the other ideas. If diverse or even contradictory, extreme ideas will not, in fact, make you an extremist. We have nothing to fear from having an open mind. It is, in fact, the greatest resource you have for building wealth. So, if all of that did not offend you, again, welcome. We're going to get along just fine. Be sure to check out all the historical episodes while you can. Now today, as Uncle Ben would say to young Peter Parker, with great power comes great responsibility. The money we use has value because we believe it's valuable, because we believe the stewardship of our money system is in the hands of a responsible central bank. We assign power to them to change how our money works over time, though. With great power comes great responsibility. Now think about your own approach to investing here. The tendency is to place the focus on the object rather than the custodian, the asset rather than the manager, the contents instead of the carrier, and so on. And in the same way that weapons can defend the innocent and be the origin of harm, I'm more convinced than ever that central bank issued digital currencies aren't really, in fact, about the money. It's about the hands that hold it. Programmable CBDCs, or digital cash, as the Reserve Bank of New Zealand calls it, will almost certainly bring immense benefit as wealth itself becomes digital. Like, that's phenomenal when you think about the transformation of analog wealth converting into digital wealth. Something pretty big might be involved around all of that. Now, it also has the potential to cause some harm, especially when you understand how this technology works. Now, any due diligence on this topic should also cover both sides of the immediate benefit argument and weigh it up against the longer-term risks. CBDCs, though, could create the space for genuine competition within the banking system. So you just think about how much we hate on the banks for making all of that money out of us and then sending it off overseas. Could this actually help in that space? Because I think it could. And considering the last 4 years of inflation, another benefit that I would consider is that CBDCs could, if they were programmed to do so, facilitate a more surgical approach to monetary policy with less collateral damage, being able to control inflation better without causing unemployment or asset bubbles. No matter which way you slice it, though, the power to influence how money moves in and around our economy is about to increase. But with great power comes great responsibility, right? But now I'd really like you to genuinely listen with me carefully to this conversation, listen to what my guest is saying today, and even how he's saying it. The fact that they engage with humble podcasts like mine would suggest that we should indeed extend a degree of trust around the facts as they see it. Today, I'm grateful to be speaking with Ian Woolford. He is the head of money and cash at the RBNZ. Let's begin. You're listening into the Everyday Investor Podcast, and I'm your host and financial advisor, Darcy Ungaro. In this podcast, I'll cover anything that can be useful for building new wealth in the new world. I don't mind if you have a lot or a little in your head or in your wallet. Learn with me how to be a better everyday investor. Check out the notes for articles, special deals, referral links, and to sign up to the free fortnightly newsletter. If you enjoy this today, please leave a 5-star review, and most importantly, keep in mind that today can't be considered personalized financial advice. If you need that, reach out to me or contact your current financial advisor for input. Let's make a start. All right. Welcome to the Everyday Investor Podcast, everyone. Today, I'm catching up with Ian Woolford, who is the head of money and cash at the RBNZ, the Reserve Bank of New Zealand. How are you, Ian?
I'm good, thank you.
Cool. Now, just a little bit of background for people before we get stuck into this. I know that you've been I'm just on LinkedIn right now. You've been at the Reserve Bank of New Zealand for just over 23 years. But what is your role with head of money and cash actually involve?
In the money and cash department, so we produce or we procure banknotes and coins, so physical cash. So we procure them from offshore, we store and distribute them, and we have a policy function inside the department where we're doing a lot of work on cash system redesign and digital cash, as well as what we call private innovation money. So that's looking at things like stable coins, for example. The cash side of the business is the traditional side, and I suppose the digital side of the business is the new side of things. And it's just so interesting on the digital side of things. I can't talk about it without talking to people about how important cash is, and that all the work that we're doing on digital cash has no implications for the demise of cash. We're doing everything we can to make sure that cash is still available, but it comes up every single time I talk about digital cash.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And we'll get stuck into the reasons why, I think, as we go through this, because I think the term, I was learning about this last night. So cash, where does that term come from? It seems like there's a French word, caisse, but it's interesting because it refers to the box in which money was originally held in. And then eventually the word for cash actually came from that box itself. So the container ended up being the name for the thing that was inside of the container, which I felt was kind of an interesting evolution, because now we're at a point in time where, well, everything is going through a digital transformation of some sort. So I guess what we're seeing right now, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm kind of assuming this is how you would look at this, but this is kind of like an evolution of cash. Would that be correct?
Kind of in a way, that's right. I mean, we've got a couple of drivers in thinking about digital cash, and one of them is increasing digitalization. So, the world is changing and the way people use money is changing. And so you can think of it to future-proofing people's choices, because it's important that people have choice in how they transact, and cash is being used less and less for everyday transactions, although there's still a lot of cash in circulation, and continues to rise actually. So, we don't see any demise in the for the future of cash, although there is quite a bit of fragility in the system. So we're having to do, and there's quite a lot of market failures, as economists would say. So we're doing quite a bit of work on how to intervene to make sure that people still have that choice. We don't, in a sense, we're not pushing our product, but our mandate is to meet the currency needs of the New Zealand public. So it's important that cash is there for when people want it, but it's also important that people have choice, and that's really what's motivating us on the digital cash side, is to give people choice to use central bank money digitally or physically. So
Got it.
there's no compulsion in any of this. It's really just to give people choice.
And the last time we spoke, which was in 2021, quite a while ago now, we were talking about this in the context of CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. And around that time, there was a round of public consultation. And recently, we've come through another round of public consultation, but we're now referring to it as digital cash. So why the change in terminology?
Yeah, well, CBDCs, or central bank digital currency, is in a way the generic term. That's what most central banks are looking at the moment. When we talk about digital cash, it is a CBDC. But the reason why we went to digital cash was really in thinking about, well, what is it we're trying to achieve? And what we're trying to achieve, in a way, is to, as best we can, replicate physical cash, and also to just try and get away from the jargon, just to try and demystify it a little bit. We engage with people, and you talk about a CBDC and it sounds kind of technical, but when you draw the analogy between digital cash and cash, it's a lot easier for people to understand it. And when we talk about trying to make it as similar to cash as possible, not just because it's a form of central bank money, but also because just like you can pull $5 out of your pocket and hand it to someone, we want to be able to provide digital cash that's peer-to-peer. We want it to be private. And now cash is the most anonymous form of transacting. And if that's what you value, then, and as I keep saying, we want cash to be available for people. Use cash. Any form of digital transaction leaves a footprint, but we're very keen to convey that we are very focused on the privacy dimension. So, because that is an aspect of cash. So when we talk about privacy by design, in our last consultation, we included a quite a lengthy paper on the importance of privacy. And this is an issue that comes up a lot. It's something that really concerns people, and we fully understand that. Usually what you hear from people is, well, why would I want the government following what I'm doing with my money? And the point that we always make is, because the design approach to digital cash is one where, again, it's very similar to the cash system. Because if you think of us, we're like a wholesaler. We get the cash produced, we store it in volume, and then we sell it to banks, or it goes out to banks, and they distribute it. And it's the same kind of concept with digital cash, in that we won't have any direct relationship with the public. We won't know who's holding it. We certainly won't have any access to their accounts, because it will be third-party providers, banks or fintechs, or other third-party providers that provide the digital wallet. So again, in that sense, it's like cash with respect to privacy.
Okay, so if we think about cash, well, where would I put cash? I could put cash anywhere, really. I could put it underneath the mattress. I could put it in my pocket. You mentioned a couple of times now that cash will be available for as long as people want to use it. And what I'm picking up is that perhaps when people start using digital cash, they'll probably prefer to use that. But I guess one of the differences between cash and what I think we're talking about here, though, is that cash is like a bearer asset, so that you could actually have, so it has intrinsic value in a way, I guess. If you're holding it, whoever is holding it has it,
Yep.
right? Whereas
Yep.
with digital cash, any digital currency, it has to be held within some sort of digital wallet. And you mentioned fintechs could be the producers of such wallets. So talk
Mhm.
me through what kind of technical details you can share. I know we're really early stages here, but if we could just have the same sort of experience as pulling $5 cash out of our pocket to give to somebody who's just helped us doing some digger work on our driveway.
Yeah. So, I mean, the specific technical details sort of need to be worked through. But I mean, obviously, digital wallets are available now. You use them in different shapes and form. Part of our consultation was talking about the functionality. So I mentioned peer-to-peer, offline functionality. You mentioned, cash being like a bearer asset in a way, and that's another distinction of digital cash in a sense, and that even though your wallet will be provided by a third-party provider, your credit risk is different from, say, a credit risk with a bank, because this is money issued by the government, and so you can have more confidence in it. Again, some similarities with how to think about cash.
Right. Okay. Because yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, you have a direct line of communication directly with the issuer of that currency, rather than a relationship with another financial intermediary where they are custodying that digital currency on your behalf. So if I was to have a wallet on my smartphone, and it had, 1,000 New Zealand dollars in the form of digital cash or CBDCs, I'm not really taking, I might be taking some technical risk with the manufacturer of that wallet, and subject to how the passphrases work.
Yep.
Yeah, there's some risks there for sure, but I'm not taking any credit risk, is what you're saying.
That's right. There's a difference between credit risk with a private institution and the government. Exactly.
So again, last time we spoke, probably the biggest thing that I got out of our last conversation was more of an appreciation, I guess. I won't say it's deep, because none of my appreciations are that deep, but it was definitely an appreciation around the importance of protecting New Zealand's monetary sovereignty. And that
Right.
phrase, for people that are listening, just means it's referring to a nation state's ability to control and manage its own monetary and financial affairs. So,
Yep.
how have non-traditional payment channels like fintech options, Apple Pay, even cryptocurrencies, how have they already impacted New Zealand's monetary sovereignty?
When we talk about monetary sovereignty, and you've given a good definition of it, it's not a current concern, in the sense that when we're talking about issuing digital cash, it's not to outcompete the private sector. Most money in circulation is private money. In New Zealand, most people transact using banks, although increasingly, Wise or Revolut or Dosh or what have you. And that's fine. That's fine by the Reserve Bank. That's not what we're talking about when we're talking about loss of monetary sovereignty, because people should have choice, and choice to use cash, digital cash, or private forms of money. That's fine. The issue that most central banks worry about is more the emergence of global currencies. And that's a situation that really first came to central banks' attention with Libra, the Facebook backed initiative, and then it became DM. And when you've got a combination of a big tech with sort of global reach, and
Mhm.
people starting to transact in a global currency, then the monetary sovereignty issue becomes one of, can you set your own interest rates? Does the New Zealand dollar, is it relevant anymore? So that's the aspect of monetary sovereignty that we care about. I mean, as a central bank, of course, we worry about financial stability.
Mhm.
Um, but in the medium term, what the allocation, um, or the market share, if you like, between banks and stable coins and fintechs and other payment providers is, in a sense, doesn't really worry us. People should have choice, and you would. One of the really big drivers for us in talking about digital cash is to drive innovation into the system. And we're not seeing the innovation from the banks. We're not seeing deep penetration from fintechs, glacial pace and open banking, for example. And so, that innovation's got to come from somewhere. And our kind of starting point is you need an environment where there is trust and confidence in third-party players to challenge the banks, to partner up with the banks. But what we want to see is greater competition, greater innovation, and better outcomes for New Zealanders in terms of lower cost of transacting. So, one point I always make is, you talk to a lot of central banks who are thinking about digital cash or CBDCs, and they often talk about uptake, almost as if it's like a Goldilocks sort of a thing, where you want a certain level of market penetration, but not too much, because if it's too much, then that has an effect on bank funding. To me, that's not really as important. What's important is you retain monetary sovereignty, so we can operate monetary policy, and the New Zealand dollar is the unit of account. The other point is really around driving that innovation. So if you as an individual decide, I don't use cash, I don't have any need for cash, and I don't much care for digital cash, well, that's fine. But if we're correct and we can use this to drive innovation and more competition, and therefore lower prices, even if you're not using digital cash, you'll benefit from a more competitive and dynamic environment. So that's really our two big drivers: choice, innovation, and sovereignty.
Okay. And that sovereignty piece, just to clarify, though, because I guess the definition I was using was more around a nation state's ability to control its own monetary and financial affairs. But what you're going a bit further into that and defining it as something that, as long as it's the New Zealand dollar that's being innovated and competed on, the New Zealand dollar is the base layer. It's global currencies, or a form of a global currency, which would include cryptocurrencies, or it would include a social media network's attempt to create a currency, which again would be a form of digital currency. But that would be the thing that is a threat, not necessarily Apple Pay, for example, right?
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, at the moment we've got really significant penetration by the card schemes in New Zealand. They're expensive to use, but people have the choice to use it. We're just going back to your monetary sovereignty point. I mean, I think we're saying the same thing. I'm just giving a couple of specific examples of the aspects of controlling, your nation's ability to control. But what I'm talking about here is interest rates and the unit of account.
Okay, I understand. Okay, and so and we'll come back to that if we have time here. But I want to ask you about financial crime, because I was talking to somebody. I think there was some sort of conference on recently around financial crime, and I saw a post on LinkedIn regarding this. And a Chainalysis report came up from 2022 that talked about how much criminal activity happens in the crypto space. 0.25% of all crypto transactions are actually illegal in some way, with central bank issued money. Up to 5% of global GDP is related to money laundering alone. And this is according to that report. So I'm curious, because financial crime and everything that goes along with that, that's not good. Will CBDCs, digital cash, reduce financial crime in the same sort of way that, even using Bitcoin can actually reduce crime just because it's so transparent?
I guess our view is any form of digital transaction leaves a trail. But one thing that I would say is there's a difference between correlation and causality. So I don't think that we don't think cash causes crime. Crime happens because people want to enrich themselves in various ways, and cash is anonymous, and it's a convenient way of sort of transacting. But I think it is the case that digital cash will not be anonymous, just like your bank account at whichever bank you bank with is not anonymous. The police will need grounds for some sort of criminal activity or whatever to look into your transactions, and if they do that, then there'll be a trail. And at the moment, it's probably easier for them to do that into bank accounts than it is in form of, cryptocurrencies. But I'm sure they'll evolve and catch up.
Well, yeah, like I would just assume, based on what I understand of how blockchain works, I would assume it would be very easy to sort of see what's going on. So if there was bad actors moving financial resource around on a blockchain network, you're going to see it between the wallet addresses. And so I'm just
Yeah.
wondering, with digital cash, surely that would give, and I guess this would create more competition within that sector of financial crime. If there was another fintech that wanted to innovate in that space, I guess it opens up opportunities there, doesn't it? To almost like, hey, there's a block explorer option where you can actually monitor transactions to see if there is illicit activity going on. So it kind of would be easier with CBDCs to track transactions for the purposes of illegal activity, right?
Well, I mean, CBDCs or current forms of account-based transactions, or private sector offerings of blockchain-based transactions. So, in that sense, sure, it's easier to track than cash. That's true.
Yeah. Okay. And one of the other areas that I'm, especially I think everybody in the last few years, 4 years, has been getting better at understanding is just how monetary policy works. And I guess this is probably connected in some way to that monetary sovereignty piece that we were talking about before, right? Where
Mm.
if inflation gets too hot, interest rates go up. If it gets too loose, interest rates go down. Do you see that CBDCs or digital cash can be used in the future to be more surgical? Can it be used by central banks to be more surgical in their monetary policy pursuits? So instead of just increasing interest rates like a carpet bombing approach indiscriminately, where everybody's cost of borrowing goes up, will it be possible to control the cost of money for specific sectors of society?
Uh, I mean, that is certainly not what we're thinking about. We're not doing any work on that. It's a little bit analogous in a way from time to time, because the Reserve Bank is also a prudential
Yeah.
regulator of the banks. And, from time to time we get interest groups or uh, government objectives in particular sectors. And the question arises, can you change the risk weights, for example? But that is not the sort of game that we're in. We want to have as a level playing field as possible. So I think, if the idea there is a particular cohorts of wallet holders, and you're trying to target them, no, that's not what we're talking about. And back to the two-tier model, I'm not even sure the Reserve Bank would know, who those wallet holders are, and what cohorts of society they're in. So, no, I don't really think so. I would make one distinction though, and that is, if you think about what happened during COVID, governments very, very keen, for example, to support their population and businesses in various ways. And I'm talking broadly speaking, governments around the world, including New Zealand, and often trying to do that via the banking system, often via cheaper lending or cheaper funding for banks. So, emergency facilities get put in place with the hope that that would trickle down and make more credit available at lower rates for people to support the economy. Now, that's a fairly leaky approach. If you did have, for example, a reasonably broad-based uptake in digital cash, it would be possible for the government to, put money directly into people's accounts. Um, Potentially. I'm sort of thinking aloud here slightly, which is a bit dangerous, but in
Yeah.
any case, not the kind of surgical monetary policy tool that you're talking about. That is not something that we've
Okay.
even remotely considered.
So I guess we're referring to qualitative, right? Like that's kind of connecting the wallet holder with some other external data points to determine
Mm.
how far their dollars will go relative to somebody else. But
Yeah.
there's also that quantitative approach, I guess, where you could say a subset of wallet holders in certain jurisdictions that have been affected by a natural disaster could be, we could bypass the banking system and
Mm.
put assets directly into their digital wallets. That would be definitely a possibility, correct?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about like Cyclone Gabriel, for example, trying to support people, and also the ability, one of the real challenges in Cyclone Gabriel was the internet was down, the power was out, electronic transactions weren't able to happen because of the fragility in the cash system. It was hard for people to get cash, so we did a lot of work to get cash into the affected areas, helicoptering and cash and services and the like. But with a digital form of cash, if it's offline and you can transact peer to peer, then you abstract away from some of those more conventional infrastructure constraints, and particularly when things go down.
And like there's where we're at right now, which is pre-launch, for lack of a better term. And then there's where things will naturally go afterwards. And by naturally, I mean through human intervention, ingenuity.
Mm.
I'm always thinking about, what does it look like today? And then what could be the outcome tomorrow? Because when I'm talking to people about investing, they're building wealth not for today, they're building wealth for tomorrow. And
Yeah.
if we kind of stretch this out into the future, you mentioned the, I guess, systemic risk or the considerations anyway with the banking system as it is right now. Would there be risks? Like I'm assuming there would be. Would there be risks in bypassing the normal credit creation process that currently happens, where banks will make individual assessments around whether or not somebody is worthy of credit? Are there risks with bypassing that process and having a direct connection with the public?
We're not talking about credit creation. That will still be the preserve of the banks or the non-bank sector, credit unions, and etc. We're talking about transactional money
At
used for
this stage,
transaction.
at this stage, I'm thinking about more in the future, right?
Yeah. Who knows what will happen in the future? And like I say, we're concerned about financial stability. The banks play an important role. They've got scale. They've got relationships. In the absence of the Reserve Bank looking at digital cash, and when we think about digital cash and that innovation, we think there's a need for fintechs and others. That then raises questions about trust and confidence in that sector. And
Yeah.
so, we're talking about making sure there's, adequate regulation there. But how things will evolve through time, who really knows? It's like the early days of the internet. You had dial-up, private sector not really seeing the advantages, of a lot of government initiatives to provide fibre, not really knowing what that will do, how things will evolve, and then the private sector piles in and builds on it and leverages off the innovation. So quite how all of that unfolds, who knows? But as a central bank that's worried about financial stability, we're worried about orderly kind of outcomes.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. So just going back to that term digital cash, because I don't want to leave this concern go. Like one of the biggest concerns that it seems like people have raised, including the people that I've talked to on this podcast, but also privately, is privacy. And
Yeah.
you've stated several times that you want digital cash to be private, but
Mhm.
private from whom?
The point that we've made is this money, digital cash, will not be programmable by the Reserve Bank. So there'll be no kind of control over it. We're like a wholesaler. We won't see individual transactions or even who owns it. But I absolutely understand that privacy is really important, and it's fine for me to sit here and say, we care about this. I think the proof is going to be in the design of it. Or people having trust and confidence, because anything to do with money is about trust and confidence.
Mm.
And privacy is clearly the number one issue that people raise when we're talking about digital cash, and we understand that and need to take that seriously. And so it's not going to be enough for someone like me to sit here and say we care about it. It's going to be about the design of it, the governance of it, the legislation that enables it, because this will not be a Reserve Bank decision, and no one will be compelled to use digital cash. So we'll need to make sure that both the structures, the governance, the processes give people confidence, and more likely than not, the legislation to embed, or to alleviate privacy concerns, as well as other supporting mechanisms like consumer digital rights, for example. So it's going to have to be a multiplicity of ways of addressing people's concerns, which we fully understand. But like I keep saying, there's no compulsion here, and this is to give people choice. And if people really might be repeating myself, but if people really are concerned about privacy, use cash.
Yeah. So another concern that people have is the linking of digital identification to our wallet address or to the currency itself. How likely is it, not right away, but how likely is it that eventually there will be some sort of linking to our digital identities online to our CBDCs?
Well, I don't really know the answer to that. I mean, I think increasingly that's the way things are going, but it's not something that the Reserve Bank is driving, because there'll be third-party providers. They may want digital forms of ID, or they may take physical forms. I mean, one thing, and I don't purport to be an expert in digital identity, but one thing that I would say is, one thing that people don't quite understand is that well-designed digital forms of identity give you as an individual far more control and far more privacy than physical forms. And the simple analogy there is, if you know you want to get into a bar and someone asks you for your ID and you show them your license, you're giving them quite a lot of information. And actually, all they need to know is, are you old enough? And so again, I understand that privacy matters to people, but that is not something, in terms of digital identity, that is a Reserve Bank mandate. How the third-party providers, or what the third-party providers require, because if they're onboarding people, there'll be all the usual. Just as if you go to a private bank now, and want to open an account, they'll ask you some questions, right? And they'll be worried about anti-money laundering legislation and those sorts of things, and it'll be the same for digital cash.
Yeah. And just on the democratic process part, which I believe is definitely another concern, there's been a couple of rounds of public consultation. There's another couple of steps involved in the rollout here. When I was looking at the submissions on like the latest round of public consultations, I noticed that there was a lot of corporates and individuals. Corporate submissions were spot on, well done. But how contingent will a CBDC rollout or digital cash here in New Zealand, how contingent will it be on public support? Because obviously you guys are doing a good job getting around there and talking about it like you're talking to me. That's a big step. Someone like me anyway. But how contingent, because I know that there are some people quite passionate about the risks with CBDCs. And you mentioned the trust word several times and the lack of compulsion that there will be. But what if the public just says, "No, we're not having it. We don't want CBDCs. Bugger off." What are the options?
Well, so a couple of things to say. I think firstly, we're not rolling it out. We're going through. If you think about something like a new form of money, especially one that potentially operates outside of the banking system, you've got a lot of complexity there around interoperability and all that kind of stuff. So there is a lot of work to do. So it's not rolling out in the sense that we've done a couple of consultations and then maybe one or two more and then it's done. No, there's still a lot of water to go under the bridge. And ultimately, as I said before, it's not actually a Reserve Bank decision, so we won't be rolling it out. So it will be. We will need legislative change to do this. So in terms of being a democratic, it would need to be supported not just by, I would say, whatever government is in power at the time, but multi-party sort of support. So there's a lot of work to be done, not just on the technical side of things, but to answer people's quite legitimate questions about how it will work and why might you use it. But to the bugger off, I'm not using it. As I keep saying, that's a choice.
Yeah.
No one will be compelled to use this, just as no one is compelled to use cash at the moment.
Okay, sure. All right, so we'll finish up on this question. I think this is the last one I have. So Augustin Karstens, who heads up the BIS, or Central Bank to Central Banks, correct me if I'm wrong on that one, has urged countries to get their legal foundations in place for CBDCs, kind of like what you were alluding to before, stating that it is simply unacceptable that unclear or outdated legal frameworks could hinder their deployment. So going back to that monetary sovereignty piece, which again refers to the nation state's ability to control and manage its own monetary and financial affairs, how influential is the Bank of International Settlements with the CBDC, not rollout, but CBDC process here in New Zealand?
Well, not particularly. I mean, the BIS, is running a number of projects that central banks look at. So just as at the moment there's international protocols around, for example, cross-border transactions, you've got to have a sender and a receiver, and having some established protocols is efficient. The BIS isn't particularly influential. Every country will make its own decision. There's no coordination here, and central banks, although we often say most central banks around the world are studying CBDCs and at various stages of pilots or proof of concepts, or doing a lot of research. They'll have their own kind of motivations. A lot of central banks are looking at wholesale CBDC only. A number of central banks, including us, are more interested in a more generally available one for all the reasons that I've talked about. So I think what the BIS is saying is, it's important to don't forget about the legal foundations of money in your country. In a sense, there's no sort of global coordination on this. Coordinated by the BIS or anyone else. This is something that we're doing for New Zealand's, for our objectives to meet the needs of the public. That's in our current legislation, and if our legislation gets updated to deliver digital cash, it will be for New Zealand objectives, not for any global objectives.
Privacy, choice, non-compulsion, no global coordination. Well, there is one thing though on that, Accenture. So that is one of the names that keeps on popping up as massive global consulting firm that seems to be involved with the rollout, not rollout, but involved with this initiative with a lot of central banks. That seems to be a common denominator. So kind of implies that there's a little bit of coordination going on there. Is that not the case though?
I don't think so. I think Accenture is just a big tech firm. There are lots of tech firms around the world and in New Zealand that constantly, contact central banks saying, "Hey, we know about blockchain, or we know about this or that." But yeah, no, there's no. I mean, Accenture is a big global player, so it's not surprising that they're involved in a lot of CBDC work. But again, it will come back to what is the specific country interested in? What are they wanting to trial? What are they wanting to look at?
Yeah. Okay. And so, lastly, like we've just come out of the second round here of consultations. When would we realistically see the next round? Because I think more and more people are starting to kind of like learn about this, and they might want to have a say. So where could people go to learn a little bit more coming out of the Reserve Bank's end about how things are tracking and what to do next?
Yeah, we're trying to be as transparent as possible. So when we did the last so we've done 2 consultations. When we did the last one, We released about another 5 or 6 documents, I think, with a lot of background, including the material that. So we had done some work with Accenture, and that's on our website. So people are welcome to go and look at it and understand it. And we'll continue to be as transparent as we can. We don't have a next consultation scheduled, and there will be many more consultations, so many more opportunities for people. There's so many dimensions that we will want to consult publicly on. There'll be lots of opportunity for people to comment. The first consultation, we just said there's this concept about a CBDC. What do you think about it? The second one was to say, okay, well, what might it look like? What are the features that it might have? And we've got feedback on that, and we'll be releasing the results of that in due course. We got so many submissions; it just takes a while to go through them. We got 18,000 completed the survey.
Cool. Yeah, I'm not going to pretend like I read even half of those, but they are like really good because it gives you an insight as to the key stakeholders, if I can use that term, like people in the fintech industry that have something to gain by working with the Reserve Bank to get this launched correctly. And then there was a degree of individual people that submitted expressing their concerns from various different perspectives. That's democracy, right? That's cool. That's the way it should go.
Well, that's right. And we're trying to be as transparent as possible. And like I say, I don't know how many there will be, but I would be, there'll be several, at least, more consultations.
Okay.
Yeah. So
early
a lot
days.
of water to go under the bridge and a lot of opportunities for people to have their say.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Well, look forward to maybe catching up the next time there's one of those things, because the more people know about it, the better informed they'll be around the risks and the benefits. They should be held in tension at all times. So that's good. Well, thank you very much, Ian. Thank you again for your time today. Really appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks for tuning in to the Everyday Investor Podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard and you want more, check out the Everyday Investor with Darcy and Garrow on YouTube. Follow me on all the socials and check out some of the online courses, sign up to the free fortnightly newsletter, and more. All the links are right there in the show notes. As I leave you, remember, some investments or strategies discussed here may result in financial loss. Always do your own research and seek qualified advice if you can before making any investment decisions. See you next week.